Thank you for joining us for an episode of That Solo Life, the podcast for PR pros and marketers who work for themselves. I am Michelle Kane. My company is Voice Matters, and I am here as ever with my wonderful co-host Karen Swim. She is the one that keeps us all together over at Solo PR Pro. But today we are thrilled to be joined by a wonderful guest. We are joined today by Blake Hutchison. He is the CEO at Flippa.com, which is the world's largest marketplace to buy and sell online businesses. So, solos, we're looking at you. Blake leads the team as they build out a product empowering exit and ownership for business owners and entrepreneurs globally. Prior to running Flippa, Blake has held leadership roles across multiple fast growth tech businesses across e commerce and SaaS or SaaS. I always mess that one up, but that's okay. I'm a professional. Ay, ay, ay. Hi, Blake. We're so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much,
joining
Michelle.
us.
Thank you, Karen. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat today.
Yeah,
Yes.
we are so excited. And Blake, Flippa has really been on the forefront of the part of the creator economy that people don't talk about, that there is this whole other trend that's happening. So we are so excited to learn from you and to talk about some of the things that you're seeing. And it's funny, one of the hot topics among our Solo PR Pro community was, what would be a good exit strategy for our businesses? Because we're service businesses and people don't understand. So I know that our solos are going to tune in and they are going to be taking copious notes about you and what you're saying, because you really are the leading expert.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's really, really interesting time for business owners of all sizes, but certainly small online business owners have a really unique opportunity right now because there's so much demand for what as I was saying before the show, what we kind of describe as a new asset class. So most online business owners don't think of them that way, but investors and buyers do. So it's a unique market.
I love that you are framing it that way, because it really is, these things that we build truly are assets. And I know we have a colleague that recently sold a long media company a blog, and it was a labor of love initially. And over the years, she really built it up and she was able to sell it. And I think that we don't really think of that, especially if we, been in business for a few years, because this is kind of on the newer end, that we don't think of that being an asset.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, if you're happy to, I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a wonderful woman in Philadelphia, and she had a crochet blog. And so she and the crochet community would contribute content to this blog. And obviously, being about crochet, the content was about that. Now, she ran that for 17 years. And as you just described, Karen, it was a labor of love, right? So she was clearly passionate about crochet and had harnessed a great community who was equally passionate. Well, the reality is when you build something like that that's got a community where there is a passionate usage, it's often revenue making and it's lucrative for the business owner. Well, the good thing about that is not only is it lucrative for the business owner while they're running it, but it's potentially very lucrative when you exit. Now, of course, blogs come in all shapes and sizes. In her case, she sold for $90,000 24 hours after listing on Flippa. And that's pretty good. And then you get the other spectrum. We had a blog which was about privacy, like GDPR compliance, and had some articles on there that people would use to figure out how to set up their websites. So you knew how to have the little allow cookies badge and those things that we see on websites these days. Anyway, that one was backed by Google AdSense revenue. So you plug in the Google AdSense pixel and Google will serve up the right ads. And that sold for $5.2 million. So it kind of gives you that spectrum, right? But they're both blogs. They're both content websites. They both make money through advertising revenue, different shapes and sizes, but something for everyone.
That is incredible.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it gives hope to a lot of people in our business, because we spend a lot of time creating content for our clients and thinking about all of the things, SEO and traffic, but we can do those same things for our own content. And often we are, we're not treating ourselves like a client, and it can make a nice little nest egg. And so it's a different way of thinking. So sometimes PR people think about the client book of business, is that something that someone would buy? But here's an entirely different path to revenue that you can really make money from. That's really exciting.
Yeah. And you know what's really great about it? People tend to run these things without necessarily thinking about an exit.
Right.
And so they are genuinely cash flow generating businesses, and that's great. You get to pay yourself a wage, but how good is it that after running it for X number of years, and in some cases it's 2, in some cases it's 20, there's a little windfall for you at the end of it. And often, global media, US media as well, will talk about unicorns and big tech founders and billionaires and those types of things. And the exit as a concept seems foreign to most people. But actually, most small businesses have really great inherent value. And they are labors of love. They're passion exercises. And so buyers will see that. They'll pay for that. There's value in that. And we want people all over the world, small business owners, to recognize that what they're building actually has real value for somebody else, and you can have a windfall.
Definitely something to think about. And I think, like Karen says, many of us in our line of work, we're just doing the work and we're not giving thought that someone might want to buy this or something that we're doing. Since the pandemic, we have to talk about the pandemic.
Yeah.
What changes have you seen? How has the pandemic impacted transactions on Flippa?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Michelle. In some ways, it hasn't had an impact in the sense that the average age of an asset that sells on Flippa is 4.5 years old. So to some extent, those businesses existed pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, some of those businesses saw a material increase in either traffic and or usage and or revenue through that period of time. And therefore, they were able to use that groundswell of attention, growth, however you want to describe it, as a means to sell for a higher price.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing it's probably done is given a little more awareness to the asset class in general, because for a lot of people, particularly baby boomers and the older demographic, there wasn't necessarily as great an understanding of digital businesses, right? So if you ask someone to draw a small business, they might draw a builder, or they might draw a bakery, they might draw a retail shop. But actually, there's so many digital businesses. And so now you've got a broader appreciation for the fact that, there's so many good quality digital businesses out there. And so perhaps to answer the question, Michelle, it's just brought a greater appreciation for digital. And so as a result, people who might have been investing in other types of businesses are now considering this. Now, of course, what's happened in the last 6 months is you've got the inflationary pressure, you've got the macroeconomic climate, the geopolitical climate. And so people have found that the stock market, crypto, and all of these types of things are decreasing. But interestingly, small businesses, they were never overvalued in the first place. In fact, in many cases, they were disrespected.
Right.
And so it's not like valuations have changed much. So to some extent, what we've got is more buyers interested in the same assets. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
No, that's incredible. That's so true, though. Yeah, we always kept it real about what we do and what it's worth.
Yeah.
There's no bloating in our market.
No.
Have you seen any categories that are trending?
Yeah, so certainly it often comes down to consumer habit. And so clearly during the pandemic, there were great assets which went through material growth. And they would be, things like home fitness, food, cooking blogs, all of the things you would expect that people are doing when they're at home locked up, right? And then when things open up again, it changes a lot. So the most popular categories change based on consumer habit. But of course, post-pandemic, small travel-orientated businesses peaked, right? And buyers love travel businesses, and they love travel businesses because the transaction value on average is higher than other categories.
Sure.
Because, you might buy a candle for $15 on a e-commerce business, but you might buy a holiday on a travel business for $2,500. So the unit economics for travel businesses tend to make sense for savvy buyers. And so we've seen a little bit of a spike and interest in travel. From a business model standpoint, blogs are always loved. And the reason being is people see them as passive income. Now, they're not passive. We know how hard it is to create content. But they're more passive than other businesses like e-com, where you've got to worry about supply chain and you've got to worry about pricing and these types of things. E-com is actually relatively sophisticated. We encourage people to know what they're doing before they go and buy an e-com asset. Whereas content, it's actually, while it's hard to produce great quality content, it's easy to understand the business model. So content assets have been hot and will continue to be hot. Of course, apps, right? So what most people don't know is there's $100 billion in transactional revenue that goes through the iOS App Store every year, right?
Wow.
$100 billion. Now, of course, that's not all Apple's money. That's publishers, small business owners who own these apps. Of course, there's big ones, Netflix and Spotify and all that stuff. But there's 6 million apps, right? And a lot of them are small business owners who have built these apps. And those apps obviously operate in a mobile ecosystem. And buyers have now recognized that, all over the world, mobile is a very, very high consumption device. And therefore, people who use great apps aren't going anywhere. In fact, it's now more lucrative than ever before. So there's lots of buyer demand for apps.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I use a lot of apps, and I also play games, and I spend money on the games that I really, really love. And I always think about that when I'm making a purchase, like, God, I wonder how many people are doing this on a daily basis.
A lot.
Because it doesn't seem like much. The fees are pretty small unless you're spending a ton of money. But when you multiply that, that's pretty big business. So, but I didn't realize it was $100 billion worth of business.
Yeah, and that's just Apple. I must admit, I don't know what the stats are for the Android ecosystem, but probably similar or maybe even bigger because more people globally actually have Android. So you're talking about, think about how many blogs there are in the world. I think there's 100 million or something. It's like 6 million apps, and those 6 million apps are sharing $100 billion in revenue. And so there's some really good ones out there. If you're a savvy buyer, for anything between like $5,000 and $5 million, you can buy an extraordinary app that is cash flow generating and give you a real return on that investment. So this is what people are trying to get their head around right now. Where do you put your money in an asset class which is actually generating real cash flow return?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And we can't possibly let you leave. I've heard you talk about this, and you have this saying that I really love about the difference between selling a business and running a business. Can you share your thoughts on that particular topic?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The phrase I use is that, selling a business makes you, right? When you run a business, you learn so much. You are a different person. It changes you. Running a business changes you. There's very few people in the world who can actually say, I've run a business. And then for all of those people who do that, and let's not forget that small businesses are the lifeblood of any great economy.
Yeah.
And so then there's a few people who sell. And it doesn't matter whether you sell for a small amount or a large amount. For the rest of your life, you can say, I've sold a business, and know what that experience is like. Yeah. And that makes you. You are a different person when you've learned how to sell a business. You need to understand the financials. You need to be able to negotiate. And ultimately, you get to see some money hit your bank account. And that is a windfall, be it very small or very large, it's a windfall. And so I believe that selling a business makes you, because so few people in the world have ever done it and experienced it. Now, what is really important for people to know is that when buyers look at your business, if it's a service business, if it's a blog, if it's e-com, doesn't really matter. What they're doing is they're going to pay you for the performance of the asset, and they're also staring at future opportunity. And so what you've got to figure out is you've got to pitch what's happened, but what also could happen. And the best way to do that, and most people never think about this, is explain all of the stuff you're really bad at.
I love it.
And the reason being is buyers are smart. So they say, wow, you're doing $1 million in revenue. Congratulations. And you've just told me you're really bad at these 3 things.
Yeah.
So now they then say, I can then turn that asset into something better because guess what? I'm actually good at 2 of those 3 things.
That makes a lot of sense. Because you can see the potential, which is very different than, kind of hard assets that we see. Like I think about the experience when you're buying a house, you don't necessarily want to see the potential through the flaws. You want to see yourself living there as it is. But with a business, it's very different because you do want to purchase an asset that's going to grow, something that you can scale. So if somebody said, I have, $1 million in revenue and we have, 2.5 million people that visit, our site, but people have wanted an app and I just couldn't figure that part out and I'm terrible at marketing. Then your mind is like, I'm great at marketing and I can get an app built through Upwork in about 2 minutes.
Yeah. That is fantastic.
Great stories around that. There was an asset, and what it enabled you to do, it was basically a blog, but you would upload a photo and it would watermark that photo for you so people couldn't steal it, right? It was
genius.
You could type in whatever the watermark was and it would quickly apply it for you. And we were watching the conversation play out, the negotiations on our platform, because it all happens on there. And the buyer said, so how much do you charge per watermark? And the guy said $1. And he said, okay, and do you have like repeat customers? And he said, yeah, everyone comes back. And I could see the buyers thinking, so why don't you just charge $10 a month, right?
Yeah.
And so buyers are thinking, oh, wow, this is crazy good because I get to buy this asset, which clearly customers like. But the guy's got no understanding of how to build a commercial model around it.
Yeah.
He does, but he just hasn't thought that much about it. But
Right.
somebody else comes in with a new perspective.
I love that. This is really exciting. And I know that my wheels are turning, but I'm always on the marketplace too. So I had a head start on some people because I've learned a lot from just watching and there's just sometimes I look at the businesses and I cheer the people. I'm like, that was brilliant. Not necessarily the line that I want to go into, but geez, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, totally. There's I'm sorry to give you so many stories, but there was
keep them coming.
There was an individual, and he bought a website which was a jobs directory just for felons. Okay, so it was called Jobs for Felons.
There you go.
And he bought this asset, and he found a community on Facebook, and he said, "Well, hey, do you mind if I post my site here? It's Jobs for Felons, and it looks like you're all talking about jobs for felons." So, and everyone said, yeah, post it in. And anyway, it then went viral and he started all these jobs started getting applied to this directory. And then, of course, the client, the felon, could apply for more jobs than they'd ever seen before, which is clearly a tough industry. And time of your life, you need a job and where do you go and find one? So the site became a love affair for him, but it also became, it was offering true value to a community that needed it. And he then sold that for $500,000 on Flippa, right? So people need to think really creatively about niche.
Lots
of good stuff out there.
Oh, definitely. If you had to tell us 1 or 2 things that we should know before we sell a business about selling a business, what would that be?
Yeah. I mean, the first one is it's a little bit like Shark Tank. So you have to understand your financials.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand your financials, it's hard for a buyer to understand whether it's a good asset for them to purchase. Mm-hmm. They're not doing it to be mean, when they ask questions about, why did revenue drop last month, or, why is your cost base up 20%? They're actually just trying to understand whether it's something they want to buy.
Mhm.
So the first thing is understanding financials. The best way to understand your financials is to use cloud accounting software. Okay.
Mhm.
So that could be QuickBooks Online. I couldn't care less what people use. QuickBooks Online, Sage, FreshBooks, Xero. Go and find what's right for you. Ask your accountant what they use, and then make a decision that way. So understanding your financials. The second thing is, as I alluded to before, don't be afraid to point out not only the strengths, but also the weaknesses, and be
Mhm.
absolutely transparent around that, because you'll find it actually works in your favor.
Yeah.
And then it's a little bit like a marriage. When you find, and we actually, from an engineering and product standpoint at Flippa, because we're a tech company, we actually study dating websites, because they figured out how to match people who have like
Yeah.
interests, right? And so
Yeah.
when you meet a buyer on our platform, you need to understand that not only are they trying to figure out whether your business is good, but they're trying to figure out whether you're a trustworthy individual to buy an asset from. And they'll
Mhm.
often need your help for the first 30 or 60, 90 days to ensure that the asset lands well. So think about your personal brand and how you present yourself to prospective buyers, because you're on show as much as the asset is.
I love
Very
that.
true.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I have
definitely.
actually bought a business, so I've been on that side of the fence. And yeah, you have to be able to understand the financial portion, ask the right questions, and understand how to assess it. But I'm looking forward to one day being on the other side where I'm selling a business too.
Yeah.
I know this has been really inspiring. Now I need to dive in a little deeper, and because you just in your day to day, you just get so stuck in, not stuck, but you're doing your thing and you don't even consider, oh, you know what? Let's see what's out there. So
We're
Yeah,
helping our
and
clients to be great. So
for the business owners out there, sometimes they forget that it's actually a great way to grow revenue,
yeah.
right? So,
yes,
so what you're doing right now is you're paying Facebook, you're paying Pinterest, you're paying TikTok, you're creating content which comes at a cost, be it time or money.
yes.
And so that's great, right? Flippa does that too. I'm not suggesting we don't. We have our podcast and we write newsletters, and we're in the exact same boat. But you can actually also, for a similar amount of money, think about what you might spend per month on customer acquisition and or creating content. And sometimes you can actually deploy that money and go and acquire an audience by acquiring a small business.
Mhm.
So let's say, for argument's sake, that you have someone who owns a laundromat, and that person owns a laundromat, and that laundromat is, I'm making it up, it's in Los Angeles. And they're like, okay, cool. I can go and buy a blog, which is about how you clean your clothes and how you keep your clothes looking good and fresh and all these types of things, right? I'm sure there's a blog about that. They can go and buy that audience and then utilize that site traffic to advertise their core business.
Yeah. Genius.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Google tells you that blog is ranking well for how do I keep my white t-shirts clean.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I've then got a relevant audience consuming relevant content, and it may be a leverageable audience for my core business.
That is
That
fantastic.
is brilliant. I think you just put some money in our pocket. So thank you for that.
No,
That
it really,
is brilliant.
yeah. No, it really is inspiring. And we hope our listeners have gotten a little bit of that fire after you've listened to this great time together with you, Blake. We really appreciate your time with us. And everyone out there, you can find Blake on Twitter at Flippa, literally at Flippa, LinkedIn Blake Hutchison, making sure I'm speaking well at this point of the day. And no, but we really appreciate your time and your knowledge. This is just a whole new way of thinking about running our businesses. So, if our listeners have any questions or comments, we definitely want to hear from you at soloprpro.com. Please do share this around because this episode, especially, is full of value. And until next time, we thank you for joining us on That Solo Life.